Welcome back, true believers and spectacular Spidey fans, to another episode of Spider-Man PS4 101. And this particular episode is going to be a very detailed one because we got lots of new and awesome info from Brian Intihar in regards to the open world aspect for Spider-Man PS4. And the amount of information that Brian has recently provided about the game is absolutely insane. But a lot of the new stuff that he brings up is really exciting. So in case you missed it, yesterday Brian posted on Twitter saying, "Just got my hands on a new build with improvements to the dive mechanic. Feels so awesome. Love our traversal team. Hashtag Spider-Man PS4, hashtag we are always listening." And if you didn't know, that was a specific complaint that some people were bringing up, is that the dive felt a little bit wonky at times when playing the demo at E3. But after actually playing the demo in person at E3 myself, I'm really curious and really excited to see what the new dive mechanic looks like. And seeing how there's lots of layers to this game's traversal system, the dive bomb is actually a really important part of it, so it's nice to see that they're going to be improving it from what we saw at E3. And that just goes to show how much Insomniac really care about fan feedback when making the game. And after Brian tweeted this out, fellow Spidey Squad member Bill Plumley actually asked him, saying, "Can you elaborate on the improvements?" And Brian awesomely replied to Bill by saying, "All I'll say is that it starts to address some of the feedback people pointed out at E3. And seeing how much Brian and Insomniac care about fan feedback to make the best Spider-Man game they possibly can makes me very happy. And as you guys know, the Spidey Squad and I have said ever since 2016, hashtag in Insomniac we trust, and I know for a fact that Brian and the rest of the Insomniac team will not let us down." And after Brian made this post on Twitter, this gave lots of fans to go and have the opportunity to ask Brian questions about the game itself. And Brian was very generous and extremely thoughtful when answering almost all the fans' questions relating to the game, and he actually provided really awesome answers. So following that tweet, a fellow user by the name of CED stated, "At Brian Intihar, would it be possible to add a flipping mechanic while dive from great heights to immerse the player even further as Spider-Man? Having the ability to do stunts like backflips or front flips while falling from amazing heights would be spectacular." And Brian simply replied to him by saying, "Sure would." So as you all know me, one of my favorite aspects about certain open world Spider-Man games have actually been the tricks that you can do when swinging. And even though this doesn't fully confirm a gameplay detail like swing tricks, it does hint to the possibility of doing some cool moves when diving. And even though executing the dive when playing the game felt great, it would also be really cool if you could add in some tricks while diving as well. Still, we'll just wait and see what Brian is actually talking about when the full game releases. So following up with another tweet by the user named Vaman, we have him saying, "At Brian Intihar, can't wait, my favorite studio doing my favorite hero. My questions: do web lines interact with buildings when you turn a corner and cause you to whip around faster? Can you do a double web or non-web zip swing? Do you think more enhancements to swinging will be added in patches?" And even though Brian didn't answer those last two questions, he did answer the first one by saying you do in fact whip around faster. Now we did see this slightly within the D23 footage all the way back in July of 2017 with this clip here of Spider-Man almost swinging past a building and having the web contort around the wall. And that just goes to show that this game's swinging system is in fact 100% physics-based, and I can't wait to see the full extent of it by the time it's fully polished. Now moving on to another tweet that actually really caught my eye is from Jonathan Askenazi, and he says, "Does Spider-Man have a music player to listen while you swing just to relax and swing freely on the map?" And Brian replied to him by saying, "We have different open world music per act." So like I brought up in one of my previous videos, the game's soundtrack is extremely orchestral or very energetic depending on what you're doing in the city. However, it is really interesting to know that as you progress through the story, the game's soundtrack will actually change depending on what scenario you are in the game. Even though I already love what I'm hearing from the soundtrack, I'm really curious to see how it's going to evolve as you keep playing the game. Now this tweet comes from Rob Guerra, who actually asked a really interesting question relating to Spider-Man's suit. And he asks, "At Brian Intihar, when Spider-Man eventually does a dive bomb from a tall building, will the suit ripple?" And Brian actually answered in a really interesting way by saying, "Depends on the suit." Now what we have seen already from the advanced suit is that when you swing in the city and fight enemies, the suit does in fact ripple. However, since that's the only suit that we have seen fully free roaming so far, I'm really curious to see if the other suits like Spider-Punk and the Iron Spider are going to have the ripple effect as well. Now I can see, for example, a suit like the Spider-Punk outfit actually having the ripple effect, since I can see the jacket kind of flapping while you swing, but the Iron Spider suit is actually a fully metallic piece of armor. So I'm not really sure if the Iron Spider suit, for example, is going to have the ripple effect. And that just shows how much detail Insomniac is putting within the alternate costumes in the game. And seeing how some of the suits will ripple and others won't, I'm really intrigued to see what the other alternate suits in the game are going to be. Now moving on to another aspect of the game which excites me a lot is relating to the game's heads-up display. And fellow user Josh Almengor said to Brian, "Awesome, any word on a dynamic/minimal HUD option for chill swing time?" And Brian answered in a really awesome way by saying, "Since E3, we've turned off the health bar, gadget, and suit power HUD elements while you are swinging around the city." And I gotta say that in my opinion, I see that that is a huge plus. From what we saw in the demo footage, Spider-Man's heads-up display is obviously on screen while you are fighting bad guys, but it also showed up when you are swinging through the city as well. And seeing how the only thing that will be on screen while you are swinging through the city is in fact the minimap just makes me really happy. I wouldn't mind if it was on screen, but just that feeling of pure immersion while swinging through the city, feeling like Spider-Man with the least amount of stuff on screen as possible, makes you feel like you are Spider-Man. And seeing how dynamic Insomniac is making the game's HUD look compared to what it already was just blows me away even more by the amount of detail they're putting within the game. And seeing how they're going to have a very minimalistic HUD while you are traversing is going to make me appreciate the beauty of the city even more. Now, since we're getting closer to the amount of new information that Brian gave us with this list, we're actually going to be switching things up a bit by talking about the stuff that Brian debunked that will be in the game. And the first gameplay mechanic that Brian debunked is actually relating to the web wings. So this tweet comes from fellow user Scans, and he says, "One last thing, can there be a possibility of a web gliding suit power or something like that, where you can glide from building to building, because that would be a really cool suit power?" And Brian simply said,
"Hell no."
No, I'm just kidding. He simply said no web wings. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually really happy that they're not putting web wings in this game. Since Peter Parker is already really experienced as Spider-Man, he's already having a full moveset of traversal mechanics to be implemented within the game without the need for web wings. There's already tons of moves to do in the game, from wall running, parkouring, web zipping, web tunneling, and of course web swinging. And the fact that web wings would pretty much be gliding at that point, I don't understand why you would want to do that over web swinging. So I'm actually really happy that Brian debunked web wings within Spider-Man PS4. Now this next point might actually make some of you upset, and it relates to climbing up your web line when swinging. So fellow user X2.5 asked Brian any possibility of climbing the web line while swinging, and Brian simply said no climbing web line. So if you have played previous Spider-Man games, specifically with Ultimate Spider-Man and Web of Shadows, there was the ability to climb up your web while you were swinging. And the primary idea that was implemented within those games when climbing up a web line when swinging is to have you gain more height after each swing. Now for me personally, when I was playing the demo at E3, I felt no need to climb my web since Spider-Man can actually gain lots of height when doing swing boosts. Now specifically within the demo that I played, after each swing you had the opportunity to go and boost yourself either upward or forward. And if you decide to boost yourself upward after the end of your swing arc, you would in fact gain lots and lots of height in the air. Now even though I know some of you are not happy that the web climb mechanic is not in this game, once you try the swinging for yourself, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm very curious to see what you guys think about this in the comment section down below, and I'm sure Brian would actually love to get your feedback about this on Twitter as well. Now this tweet actually relates to multiple mechanics about the game's web swinging. So fellow user G Rosa says to Brian, "My solution at Brian Inhar is that when having the analog stick forward all the way and you see a building, you can slightly move it in the direction of the building. That would be cool as like a swinging difficulty. Pro being my idea and beginner as the auto web attach." And Brian stated there will not be multiple swing controls. So for those of you who played Spider-Man 2, you'll know that there were in fact two separate swinging difficulties in that game. One being for the casual player and the other being for more experienced players. Now specifically in Spider-Man 2, if you had easy swinging equipped, it would be easier for you to get around town and try and attach webs to buildings. But if you had experience mode turned on for Spider-Man 2's web swinging, you would have to learn how and when to let go of your swing arc in order for you to gain more speed. Now given Brian's tweet, I'm sure some of you are thinking that the game's swinging will in fact be an easy task, but I'm here to reassure you that it will 100% be a challenge to get used to. Not only does the game have web swinging, but it also has tons of other mechanics like wall running, parkouring, web zipping, and so on. And in order for you to go faster when traversing around the city in Spider-Man PS4, you're gonna have to learn to master all these mechanics. So even though there won't be multiple swing controls, the game will in fact have lots and lots of variety when getting around town. And believe me, that's gonna make this game's traversal way more entertaining in the long run. Now the second to last tweet on this list is actually something that I'm not too sure how I feel about just yet, but fellow user Jordan actually asked Brian by saying, "Is the web slingshot going to be a feature? When you attach the webs, pull back and release." And Brian simply says,
"Hell no."
I'm just kidding, but Brian mainly says no to Jordan's question. So for me personally, I really did like the slingshot mechanic that was in Spider-Man 2 and even Spider-Man Web of Shadows, but I'm really interested to see how they're going to make up for that in this game. Like I've already said, the game is going to be packed with tons of different traversal options like parkouring, web swinging, wall running, and etc. And even though the web zipping is very fun to do in this game, I'm actually curious as to why they didn't put a slingshot mechanic in the game's traversal. However, like Insomniac have said in the past, the traversal will in fact be upgradable, so maybe there will be a mechanic that is similar to the Slingshot, or maybe something that will help you zip even faster. Still, the fact that an actual web Slingshot move is not in the game is very curious to me. And make sure to let me know in the comments section down below, and Brian on Twitter, what you think about no web Slingshot in the game. And the very last point on this huge list is actually something that I'm very, very happy about that is not in the game. So this last question comes from McLovin Gaylord, and he says, can we be able to web swing across the city in first person? And Brian once again says,
no.
And for me personally, I'm very happy that a first-person mode is not going to be within Spider-Man PS4's traversal. Not only do I know that I would get super motion sick by seeing a first-person Spider-Man game and also get vertigo from that, but I don't know why anyone would want a first-person Spider-Man game. Granted, I could see the excitement of trying to swing around the city and feeling like you are Spider-Man, but for me personally, I want to see Spider-Man web swing and pull off all these cool moves when swinging through the city. So for me, a third-person viewpoint for Spider-Man in this game is absolutely fine, and that's exactly what I want as well. However, there is a possibility that Spider-Man PS4 could have a VR feature in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see about that. But anyways, guys, that was all the crazy and awesome information that Brian Intar gave us on Twitter about Spider-Man PS4. Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below about all the new information that you learned about today. Are you excited about a lot of the stuff that Brian mentioned, or are you actually upset on how they're handling the game? I'm really curious to see what you guys think, and I'm sure Insomniac would love your feedback. But anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
Oh yeah.